Hi there, welcome to my version of this month's 12 tags of 2013. This is the tag that Tim made using his lovely distress markers. Unfortunately that made me a little bit distressed because I don't have any distress markers, so I'm going to go with my distress inks. And I've got a little bit of white distress paint here and some distress stains. So I've picked out my colour palette. I've decided to use these iris stamps from Elusive Images. They haven't been used much. I think they're quite pretty, and I don't have the dragonfly, so I'm going to go with the iris. I'll also be using my well-loved and well-used black archival ink, and I'm going to be working on white today. So as anyone that's watched these videos before knows, all my tags are made the same size and shape, so 3 inches by 6 inches, and then I keep a little template handy just to snip off the tops to make it tag shaped. And then I've got a second piece of white cardstock that I'll be stamping my main image on and doing my colouring in work, and that's 2.5 inches wide, and I'm going to rip it the way that Tim did, so I'm not really sure about the length just yet. So I've selected this iris with a text background. Excuse me, jogging the camera with my ink pad. It's a little old now, so I need to get plenty of pressure on the ink pad to make sure I ink up my stamp well. And I'm going for my second image here, mainly because I'm not sure if I want to decoupage the image later, so I'm just hedging my bets and printing another image while I've got the stamp out. As you can see, I'm not the world's cleanest stamper, and I've already made a mess of my fingers. The next thing I want to do is just decide where I'm going to rip my image, following Tim's lead. I'm taking the back of my scissors and just distressing the edges a little. In my head I've already started to envision a tag that's quite pretty and the colours are quite girly, so I've decided to use my Stampin' Up pen to get some shabby shutters onto the stems of my iris, because it's quite fine work and I'm not quite sure I'll be able to get it as neat with a brush, so I'm going to cheat a little and use this Stampin' Up pen to get the ink onto my card. So to colour my iris I've decided to use Seedless Preserves and Shaded Lilac, and I'm not sure, but I've just put a little bit of picket fence distress paint there just in case I want to lighten things up a little. And I've gone back to my paintbrush now because I find it's the best way to blend the distress ink colours when you're painting in an image. And then I'm going to have a little fun with my image, and following some of the little tips that Tim gave us on his tutorial, I'm adding a shaded lilac wash to frame my image on its outside, and then adding water to my puddles of ink and dipping my brush into them, and then just putting a few ink splatters onto my image. Just checking to see if I've got as many little splatters as I want, and I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to leave it at that. Now I'm ready to create the background tag, and that's using Tim's tried and tested method of swooshing through puddles of ink. In this case we're using distress ink, which is Seedless Preserves and Shaded Lilac, and some white picket fence, and I'm spraying it with water and then swooshing my tag through the puddles. Now this time I wanted a little bit more of the Shaded Lilac. There's one thing for sure, working with these pretty colours, I don't end up with the brown mess that I quite often end up with when I'm trying to work with these puddles of ink. And then I'm just, with the residue, creating a little bit more texture and drying in between the layers. A bit more distressing with my scissors. I do love that Seedless Preserved colour. It does remind me of squished berries. Maybe I should try that one day. And then I'm going to just create a very, very fine border. I want to keep it nice and light. I don't want too much heavy black on my tag, but just enough to highlight these pretty colours. So I'm going to distress that, and then I'm going to do the same on my main stamped image. You can see that I had a little trial at stamping on the back of there first. And again, a little bit more distressing, and then I'm going to follow the tear that I created earlier. So while I'm getting inky, I've got out some more shabby shutters, and I'm going to colour some American seam binding with it, and I'm just doing it directly from the pad. And while I was doing it, I noticed that little crinkles in the ribbon were picking up the colour more. So I like that, so I'm going to crinkle it some more. Now, whilst I'm working on the video here, you'll be able to see that it does actually look like it picks up the colour more once it's crinkled on those areas that I've created by scrunching it up. And it does give a very, very nice effect. And I thought, wow, I'm really pleased with this. But once it had dried on my project, it actually blended back in to the colour of the ribbon. So I think what I might try next time is actually letting it dry once I'd coloured it, and then doing this little part of, and then dry it again with my heat gun. And I wondered if I might get a better effect. So I'm going to try that next time, because although this looks lovely here, it does blend away to a delicate mottling rather than the obvious crinkled effect that I've got at the moment. I always like making these tags because it's a complete mystery as to where I'm going to end up once I've had a look at what Tim's done and then set off on my journey. So I'm just having a look at a few things that I might use on my tag, and then I've cut a 1/2 inch circle for the reinforcer at the top of my tag, ready to put my ribbon through. I decided to use some of those lovely pearl brads, so I'm just putting 3 little holes at the top of my tag, and then I'm going to use 2 different shades of the lilac because they look so good against the colours that I've used. In fact, I couldn't have done better if I'd bought them specifically for the project. I'm going to create a little card with a quote on. There is such peace in the beauty of a single flower that comes with this stamp set. So following the same format as I've done for the stamped image, I'm going to make a mini version with my quote on, distressing as I go and ripping the bottom, and I think it's going to sit about there on my tag. And then again, following Tim's lead, I'm just going to give a little bit of a wash around the stamp with some shaded lilac, and then a few more of those little paint splatters. So when Tim made his tag, he stamped the background tag with an image lightly in black archival, and I'm going to do the same, but I'm not sure that the black is going to work very well on my tag, so I'm going to use this crackle background, and I'm using some seedless preserves. And I'm obviously a heavy stamper because I always seem to shake my camera when I'm doing my stamping, so apologies for that. So apologies to Tim, but I couldn't not embellish my tag, and because that's half the fun, playing with your stash. So I'm going to add a little bit of ribbon, and you can see here on this video that those crackle effects that we had earlier on the ribbon have definitely faded out to a mottled look, so I'm definitely going to have another go at that. So just trimming the ends of my ribbon so that they don't fray. And I think I'm ready for the finishing touches on this tag. I love this part, hunting through my stash to see what elements that I can include on my tag. Quite often I end up with a shopping list of the bits and pieces that Tim's used that I haven't got at my disposal, so there's always a shopping list involved, and it's quite nice to have a real rummage to see what things that you've got in your stash. The only thing that I don't like about it is that I've got to put it all away afterwards. So I'm adding some glue onto my main image, and I'm attaching it to my card. It takes a little while because of the backs of the brads. So I've attached my greeting in position with some foam pads, and I'm just going to make a few decisions about how I'm going to attach things like the little pearl brads that I've taken the back off, because obviously I don't want them poking out of the back of my tag now that I've already framed it. I do want to find somewhere to put the words inspired by Tim Holtz and the date, the fact that this is my June tag, but I don't like these little tags once I've had a little play with them, as you will see. Sometimes you do run with an idea and think that it's going to work, and when you actually put it against the project you're making, it just doesn't. I always think it's best, don't worry about it, throw it away. It was just a little bit of paper and a little bit of time, and then look for a plan B. So I'm going to go back to my tried and trusted method of making a little strip with the words inspired by Tim Holtz, and one matching strip that's going to have the date June 2013. And again, I'm just going to make it into a little rounded top long tag I'm just distressing the edges as I've done all the way through the project, and writing the date, and again taking the white off with that little wash of shaded lilac. I'm using a matte pin to pierce a little hole and then just threading it onto one of these lovely little jewelled paper clips and attaching it to my ribbon. There, that looks much better, much more in keeping with the design. Happy with that. Now how am I going to attach this little jewel? I want it to have a little bit of dangle. So I've got some green embroidery thread and I'm just going to attach or tie the gem into position and then tie it onto the ribbon. So one knot to keep the gem in place in the middle of the thread, then a little one further up, just the right length. I don't want it to dangle any more than that below the ribbon so it stays on the tag, and then a final couple of knots to secure it through the ribbon that I attached earlier. Then trim off the ends and they'll hide underneath the knot of that ribbon. If you ever think that your thread might come undone, you could always add a little bit of PVA glue to any of the knots that you make. And then I'm going to attach those 3 little brads that I took the backs off of with a little bit of pin flare, and that will hold them in place on my tag. And I think that's job done. I really hope this fun little video has inspired you to pop along, if you aren't already joining in, to join in with Tim Holtz's 12 Tags of 2013. I'm having a great time and I'm sure that you will too. So just start out with Tim's inspiration and add your own interpretation. Thank you for watching.